All right, let's jump straight into it. Today, we're unpacking 5 huge stumbling blocks in English grammar and vocabulary, and we're going to turn those confusing rules into everyday communication tools. You know that feeling when you just freeze mid-sentence, wondering if you're using the right tense or the right word? Well, if that sounds familiar, you are absolutely in the right place. We're breaking down these linguistic barriers so you can finally stop second-guessing yourself and start really connecting with people.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're covering the real future, the broken plan, the history lesson, the time anchors, and the expat survival kit, right before wrapping things up with a quick final test. Basically, it's a 5-part masterclass for confidently navigating life abroad.
Part 1. The real future. Navigating if and unless. Let's start with something we do all the time. Talking about a future event when reality is kind of, up in the air. Maybe you want to travel, but it depends entirely on the weather. English actually has a very fixed pattern for this exact scenario, and honestly, once you lock this formula in, you're going to use it every single day. The first half sets up a condition using if plus the present simple tense. The second half delivers the inevitable result using will or won't plus the base verb. Think about sentences like, if my brother calls me tonight, I will ask him about the tickets. Or, if it rains tomorrow, we will stay indoors. You lay down the condition first, and then boom, you clearly state the outcome.
Now, it feels incredibly tempting to use will in the if half of the sentence, right? Because in your head, you're obviously thinking about the future. But here's the catch. The word if already carries that future meaning. You really don't need to help it out by throwing will in there twice. Just keep will strictly reserved for the results side. So instead of saying if it will be cold, just say if it is cold, I will take a jacket. Simple as that.
The exact same logic applies to the word unless. See, unless is just a super efficient way of saying if not. It literally already has a negative baked right into it. So adding a second negative verb right after it, yeah, that's a classic trap you have to avoid. Instead of doubling up on the negatives, the correct, natural way to phrase it is just, unless you apologize, she will be angry. Keep it clean, keep it simple, and let the word unless do all the heavy lifting. Moving on to number 2, the broken plan. Plans versus reality. Because let's face it, what's in our calendar and what actually happens in the real world, well, they rarely match up. Enter this beautiful little structure, be supposed to. It is the absolute perfect fix for when someone planned or expected something, but life threw a curveball. Maybe a delivery was scheduled for noon but hasn't arrived, or a friend arranged to call you but completely forgot. This phrase softens the blow of a broken plan, and it sounds incredibly native. Just remember, the verb after to never changes. Stick with the base form, no conjugation needed. This perfectly highlights the difference between a hard reality and, well, a timetable that nobody can actually guarantee. Saying the bus leaves states a rigid fact, but saying the bus is supposed to leave acknowledges the schedule while fully admitting that a delay is totally possible. It adds this amazing, authentic layer of nuance to your spoken English. Part 3, the history lesson, storytelling in the past. When you're recounting events, knowing exactly when to focus on the doer versus the action itself is the secret to keeping your listener totally hooked. In the active voice, the subject, like an architect, does the action, but we switch to the passive voice when the person who did the action is unknown, glaringly obvious, or frankly just not the most interesting part of the story. If the cathedral itself is the star of your narrative, you make it the subject. That's a deliberate choice to draw the listener's focus right where you want it. But here is a massive pitfall you need to watch out for. Verbs that describe something a subject just does entirely on their own, things like arrive, happen, or die, can never be passive. You can be wounded by someone else, sure, but nobody died you, right? You do that entirely on your own. Keep this in mind when you're telling stories. It's the accident happened, never was happened. Now, good storytelling leans heavily on past participles. And while regular verbs easily just take an ed at the end, mastering irregular verbs is a whole different beast. The best strategy? Learn them rhythmically in groups of 3. Build, built, built. Find, found, found. Take, took, taken. Honestly, say them out loud like a chant. Feeling that rhythm is the absolute fastest way to lock them into your muscle memory for fluid storytelling. All right, part 4, the time anchors, perfecting prepositions of time. These are those tiny little words where good English is honestly either won or lost. They can be frustrating, but they do follow a system. Think of this as your ultimate preposition cheat sheet. At is for precise clock times. In covers longer stretches like months and years, plus general parts of the day. And on is strictly for days and dates. Take a mental snapshot of that right now. Though I do have to warn you about one completely illogical exception. We confidently say in the morning and in the afternoon, but for some reason we say at night. Don't try to make sense of it, just treat at night like its own unique vocabulary word. This specific pair right here causes so much trouble, but the fix is actually remarkably easy. For answers the question how long, while during answers the question when. Never put a specific number of hours or days after during, and never put an event after for. You wait for 60 minutes, but you arrive during the ceremony. Keep those two questions straight and you'll literally never mix them up again. Number 5, the expat survival kit vocabulary for life abroad. Let's pivot from grammar to the reality of touching down in a brand new country. You need the right words ready to go to describe your new reality. This is your core survival vocabulary. It covers everything from that heavy, disorienting fatigue of jet lag to something much deeper, like homesickness. You know, that aching feeling of missing your familiar surroundings? Having the exact word for it actually helps you process it. This kit also preps you for daily life, like making sure you look presentable for dinner or knowing how to make polite small talk in the elevator with neighbors who might seem a little reserved at first. Now, a really common hurdle is figuring out how to end your adjectives. This comparison perfectly untangles that classic confusion between ed and ing endings. The journey is the cause, so it is exhausting. Your exhaustion is the result, so you feel exhausted. The rules might be frustrating, but hey, hopefully you are no longer frustrated by them. Another tricky area is describing exactly how we see things. If you break visual verbs down by duration, you'll always pick the right one. You look at a photo for a quick, static moment. You watch a parade or a game because it's actively moving over time. But if you lock eyes on someone way longer than is polite, you stare at them. Pro tip, don't be the person who stares. Part 6, the final test, a quick self-check. Because learning isn't just passive, let's wrap this explainer up by testing what you actually retained from these 5 pillars. Try to answer these questions in your head right now. Go back to our first pillar. What word do we permanently banish from the if half of a conditional sentence? Got it? Yep, the word is will. And for the second question, think back to the history lesson. Why can't someone be died? Because dying is an action a subject does entirely on their own, not something done to them by somebody else. Ultimately, once you stop fighting these formulas and start treating them as actual bridges to connect with people, your life abroad truly opens up. Grammar and vocabulary aren't just dry textbook exercises, they're the literal keys to greeting a neighbor, fixing a broken plan, or telling a great story from your past. So the only question left is, which rule are you going to practice first?